So we said, remember we said that if you have a basket of truma and a basket of chulin, and that falls into a box of, we say that the chulin fell into chulin and the truma fell into truma. So and the Gemara wanted to say it's the same if you have a pile of matzah, a pile of chametz. So we say, and the pile of matzah is in front of a house that's been searched already, and the pile of chametz is in front of the house that has not been searched. We say that the mouse dragged the matzah into the house that was searched, and the chametz that was not searched. So the house that was searched doesn't need another search. But the Gemara wants to know why does that work? But chametz d'oraisa mi amrina. Why should we say that it would work? Truma bismana is only rabbanon, but chametz, which is d'oraisa, it should be a safek l'chumra, and we should read l'chumra, search it. So the Gemara answers, "Atu b'dikas chametz d'oraisa." B'dikas chametz itself is not d'oraisa; it's only d'rabbanon. Mi d'oraisa, you could be mevatel b'leiv, right? Rabbanon need to be d'oraisa b'vitel b'al masagid. So that's why it works. That's why it works the same way. Another case, sibur echad shel chametz, and this time you have one pile of chametz, ulefanav shnei batim b'dukim, and you have two houses in front of it which have been searched. V'asar achbar ushakal. We saw a mouse take a piece of chametz into one of the houses, but we don't know which one. Lo yadinan ilahai al or ilahai al, which house it went into. So do we have to recheck either both houses or one of the houses? So the Gemara says, Hainu shnei shivilim. This is the same case as two pathways. This not. We have a Mishnah. Shnei shvilin echad tami v'echad tor. There are two roads. The road is 3 amma wide. A human being is 3 ammas tall. And we know that in one of the roads, a dead body is buried lengthwise, widthwise, so that you must traverse over the dead body when you walk on that road. And the other road is a Torah road. A person walked on one of the roads, and then he worked with the dough that was Torah. His friend then walked on the other road and also worked with Taharas. Now, we know for sure one of them walked on a Tamei road because both roads were walked on. So what do we say? Do we say al safek both those are Tamei? Rabbi Yehuda Omer. So in nishalu zeh b'fnei atzmo v'zeh b'fnei atzmo, if each person went by himself to a Talmud Chacham to ask about his safek, he would get an answer that it's Torah. Why? Because a road is in Reshus HaRabbi. And cases of safek tumah Reshus HaRabim, the safek is always Torah. We know this because the din of safek tumah is derived from a sota, a woman that is suspected by her husband of being unfaithful. He warns her not to sequester herself with a certain man, and Adim see themselves sequester in a room. We don't know what happened there, but that occurs in a Reshus HaYachid. And we paskin, the Torah paskin is that safek tumah, Reshus HaYachid, we say the husband's not allowed to live with her. We assume that she's tamei until she actually goes through the sota process. So that teaches us the general rule that safek Reshus HaYachid is Tomei. Suffix is just arriving is Tor. Now, a road, like we're dealing with, the suffix is Tor. Now, that's if they came independently. However, Shneim B'Vasachat Tmei, if they come together with the two men to the Talmud Chacham, you cannot say that they're Tomer, because we know one of them is Vadai Tomei. Rabbi Yossi Omer Ben Kach U Ben Kach Tmei. Rabbi Yossi says even if they came one after another, we say that they're Tomei. And Omer Rava Vitem Rav Yechon, Rava explains the Mishnah B'Vasachas. They come together, Divrei HaKol Tmei. If they come sequentially, B'Zachar Zeh Divrei HaKol Tohonim. Loi Nechlaku. Rav Yudin and Rav Yossi argue, Ela B'Boli Yishoel Alav Al Chaveiro. Somebody comes to the Talmud Chacham and asks about himself and his friend. Rav Yossi Medamen L'Vasachas. Rav Yossi compares it to the two people coming as one. Rav Yehuda Medamen L'Zachar Zeh. So our question regarding the piles of the one pile of chametz going into the two houses is going to reflect this machlokas. Rashi says, "Gabi batim nami in ba'u lishol zeh la'atzmo v'zeh b'fnei atzmo." If each party comes by himself, we tell each one that you don't have to check the house. Because since B'dikas Chametz is Drabanan, we can be Lakula. And we would say Safek is Mutter. But if they come together, then both would require B'dika. Now, that's a case where you saw the mouse go into one of the houses. You just don't know which house it went into. What about you're not sure that the mouse even went into the house? Safek al, Safek lo al. So that would be analogous to the case of Bika. Hainu Bika. Ubeplukted Rabbi Eliezer Rabbah. What's this? This not. Hanichnas labika b'mosak shamim. There is a field during rainy season. Now, during the summer, people could use a person's, your neighbor's field as a shortcut, but you can't do that in the winter because you're going to ruin the plantings there. And we know that there's a grave in one of the fields in the meadow. Now, the Omar Echad, one person said, Halachti b'mokom, I was in that meadow. The only problem is, Eni odea im nichnasti ba'osa sodev im lo nichnasti. Did I walk into that specific field which was known to possibly have a grave or not? Now, a meadow is also Rishus HaYachid. Within that meadow are other Rishus HaYachids, these fields. Rabbi Eliezer says that he's Metahir. He's Rashi says, Rabbi Eliezer lo choshev le'safik tuma ela in kei nichnas l'sodeh. If the guy knew that he had walked into the field, then it would be safik. Aval eini odea im ayelim lo. Aval hashta aval le'sfeik sfeika. Right? Because we don't know, did he walk into that specific field? And if he walked into that specific field, did he walk over the specific grave? So the Chachamim etamim over there, but Rashi says by B'dikas Chametz, which is we've established is rabbinic. So we would consider it a Sveika, that maybe the mouse did not go into the house. Shai Rabbi Yezra Omer, Safek be a Tor. If you don't know for sure whether you walked into the field, you're Tor. Safek Magatuma Tome. If you don't know whether you touched something, then we always go stringently. Okay. So you have a case where you see a mouse going into a house. Ubodak. You went in after the mouse to see if you could find a piece of chametz. Below ashka. Now the question is, did the mouse eat it or not? Or what do you do? So plukted Rab Meir Rabbon. It's not. Hi Rab Meir Omer. Called Dover Shebecheskes Tumah. If you have something that's been established as Chazakas Tumah, you have to verify. That means you could dig. I don't care if you dig down a bedrock. You're looking for a grave, you don't find it. This field does not become outside of the getter of Tumah unless you find the Tumah where it is. So according to Rab Meir, if you went into the house and you didn't find the chametz, you got to keep on looking. They say there's a limit. If you go down the bedrock and you don't find it, then we assume that it's gone. So same thing we would say regarding chametz. Now, what about you did see the mouse go into the house, al ubodak, and you went in and checked, vashka, and you found a piece of chametz. The question is, plukted Rab Shimon the time. Sodish and Evad Kever. You have a field. At one point, it was known that there was a grave there. If you walk into such a field, you're going to become tummy. However, nimsabo kever, once you find a kever, then the rest of the field becomes tahor. We don't assume that there's other kvorim there. Hanichnas l'socho tahor. Shani omer kever she'avadu kever shenimsa. Divrei Rebbe. So Rebbe will say, if I see a mouse go into a house with a piece of chametz, and then I go in and I check and I find the piece of chametz, that's the piece of chametz. We don't have to worry that there's more chametz there. However, Reb Shimon Gamliel Omer, in the case of the field, we don't know. Even if you found this dead body, maybe there's other dead bodies. Tibade kol asade kula. So Reb Shimon Gamliel, the analogous case by the chametz, just because you found this piece of chametz, you might find others. Okay. Hiniach teisha umotza eser. This happens to us because we put out, usually by minig, you put out 10 pieces of chametz and you gather them up. Let's say you laid out 9 and you found 10. So where did this extra piece come from? So do you have to check the rest of the house? That's plukta de Rebbe Rabbon. By another case, the Tanya. Hiniach mana umotza mesai. He had $100 in a box, or he put $100 of Meiser Sheni money in a box. And then when he went to the box, he saw that there were $200 there. So the din is, Rebbe holds, we have to assume that it's a mixture of chulin. You must have dropped regular money in there as well with Meiser Sheni. So you have to take $10 of Meiser Sheni somewhere else and transfer the kedusha to that. Then you can use the $20. However, Chachamim might no hakol chulin. Must be that you took out the Meiser Sheni, used it, and you put $20 new in. So if you found 9, if you laid out 9, you found 10, so the Chachamim would say that this is a brand new thing. and it's a brand new piece of chametz. And you have to keep on checking. And the other case is hiniach eser motza tesha. You laid out 10, you only found 9. I knew Seifa, that's the Seifa. The Tanya, hiniach mosayim motza mana. You left $200 of Meiser Sheni and you only found 100. Mana munach umana mutal divirepi. One of the original 100 remains there. And then the new 100 is something new. The Chachamim are called chulin. No, you must have taken the whole thing out and put chulin in. So the same thing by the chametz would be the same machlokas. A person left a shovel in one corner, and then you find it in another corner. Now, the Tanya, kardam sha'avid babayis. If you lost a shovel or a pickaxe in a house, habayis tame, everything in the house is tame. Shani oimer adam tame nichnas l'shavlu l'tolo. Somebody must have come in who doesn't know the dinim, touched everything and removed the pickaxe, and that's why everything is tame. Rav Shekel oimer, no, habayis tohor. Shani oimer yishilu la'acher v'shachach. No. The owner loaned it to somebody, forgot. Or he moved it from one corner to another corner. Who's talking about a corner here? So the Gemara says, there's some words missing. You have a pickaxe that got lost in a house. Abayis tome. Shani oimer, adam tome nichlas tolo. The person who took this pickaxe must be that if he's stealing things, he's not following dinim, so he doesn't know anything about tumah v'tahara. So we assume he touched everything, and therefore we have to assume everything is tumah. The same case would be if you find you had left your shovel in one corner, you found it in another corner. Well, who moved it? Must be some stranger went in there. By his tome. Shani oimer adam tome nichlas l'shavlu l'tolo v'zavizu v'nichlas v'zavizacheres. That's the Tanakam. Shemi Gamliel oimer habayis tohor. Shani oimer hish'ilu la'acher b'shachach. The original owner loaned it to somebody else. He just forgot he loaned it. So we don't. So that would be the same machlok as if you find there was chametz in one corner, you found it in another corner. Amar Rava. Achbar nichnas v'kikar befiv. You see a mouse going into the house with a piece of bread in its mouth. V'nichnas achra v'matzu pirurin. And you go after the mouse, and you see crumbs. So the din is tzarech bedika. We don't assume that these crumbs came from the loaf that he brought in there, because mice don't cause crumble. And therefore this is something new. However, Amar Rava tinok nichnas v'kikar biyado. If a child went into the house that was checked, and he has a piece of bread in his hand, and you go in after him, you find crumbs, then ain't tzarech bedika. So the crumbs obviously came from the loaf from the piece of bread that the child had. Children will cause crumble. So boy, Rava has some theoretical questions. Achbar nichnas v'kikar befiv. Mouse goes into the house, has a loaf of bread in its mouth, And then you see a mouse coming out with a loaf. Do we say it's the same mouth? It's the same guy. And then therefore you don't have to do bedika. Maybe it's a different mouse. And that you're going to say it's the same mouse. Then what about achbar lava nichlas v'kika b'fiv achbar shacha yotze v'kika b'fiv mal? There was a white mouse that went in with the loaf, but the mouse that came out was a black mouse with the loaf. Do we say hai vaday achrinahu? Well, this is obviously a separate mouse, and therefore you have to check. Oh, Dilma, armoy armamine. No, the black mouse grabbed it from the white mouse. It's the same loaf, and there's no loaf in the house anymore. It doesn't need bedika. Now, maybe you'll answer me. Mice won't take bread from the other mouse. Fine. So then we'd have to assume if you see a black mouse coming out that it's a different loaf, and if you got to check, I'll ask you another question. You see a mouse going into the house with a loaf. Then you see a weasel come out with a loaf. Do we say that a weasel will take food away from a mouse? So maybe we can assume that this is the original loaf, right? The weasel certainly took it from the mouse. Oh, Dilma, achrinahu. Or maybe we say no, it's still a different one. Because if he would have taken it from the weasel, if the weasel would have taken it from the mouse, well, a weasel eats mice too. The mouse would have been in the weasel's mouth as well. Fine. That if we assume that the weasel is going to take it from the mouse, why didn't he have it in his mouth? The mouse. I'll ask you another question. The mouse goes in with a loaf. You see the mouse and the loaf in the weasel's mouth, but separately. We say, so we say, well, this is clearly the same mouse with the same loaf. We don't have to check it again. Oh, Dilma, if it was the same mouse, you shouldn't see a mouse and a loaf in the weasel's mouth. You should see the mouse in the weasel's mouth with the loaf of bread in the mouse's mouth, is what the Gemara is saying. Oh, Dilma, no. Maybe Mishum be tutehu nafal. Maybe the mouse dropped the loaf because he was fearful about being eaten by the weasel. Ushkaltia. And that's how the weasel ended up with the loaf in his mouth. So on all these questions, Teku, we don't have an answer. Okay, boy Rava. Rava asks some more theoretical questions. Kikar b'shmei koira. You've got a very high ceiling in your house, and there's a beam up there, and you see a loaf of bread up there. Sarich sulam la rito. So do you have to get a ladder to get it out of there? Or do we say, I mean, it's not earthquake country. How are you ever going to see that loaf of bread on Pesach? This loaf of bread doesn't have wings. It's not going to fly off of that beam on its own. So maybe to that extent, the Chacham didn't require us to do bedika. And therefore, lo asi lemichla, because the whole purpose of bedika is to avoid eating it on Pesach. Oh, Dilma, zina denafel vasi lemichla. No, maybe it'll fall. Maybe there will be an earthquake, and it'll fall out, and then you'll come to eat it. Maybe we are worried that maybe it'll fall and you'll eat it. But what about kikar babor? The kikar is in a deep ditch. Do you need to put a ladder down there to get it? Same thing here. At least falling, it can fall by gravity, but it cannot jump out of the bore. It can't come by itself. Why? Maybe somebody will have to go down to the bore for its own reason. Come to eat it. Maybe you'll give me an answer. Maybe that we're worried about that. What about kikar b'fi nachash? The loaf of bread is in the snake's mouth. Do you have to hire tzarich chaber lahoitzi, like a magician,
Charmer.
who
Snake
knows how
charmer.
to,
Snake charmer.
a snake charmer, right? Like, right? He knows how to control snakes. You have to pay money for that, or maybe no. Begufi atrachi rabbanim. The chachamim are matriachas for bedika with our bodies, but maybe b'mamona lo atricha rabbanim. They didn't require us to spend money on it, or maybe we it doesn't make a difference. The Shulchan Aruch paskins, you don't have to hire the snake charmer. Since it answered b'teiku, and it's all rabbinic, we paskin l'kula. But if the chametz is on a beam, you have to get a ladder to get it. But if it's in a bore, you don't have to get a ladder to get it. Mishnah. Rabbi Yehuda Omer Boykin or Arbo Asar. You have to do bedika the night of the 14th. Uva Arbo Asar Shachris in the morning. Uva Shas Abir, and when you burn the chametz. V'chacham Omer Loi Bodek or Arbo Asar. No, you don't have to do 3 bedikas. It's only if you didn't do bedika the night of the 14th, you have Arbo Asar. You should do it in the morning. Lo Bodek Arbo Asar, you do Chamoy. Rashi says it means in the time if you burn it. Tosfos learns Sachamoid means even going all the way into the night. And Lo Barak Sachamoid you took Lacharamoid. Rashi learns Lacharamoid means up until the night of Pesach. Tosfos says even after Pesach, because maybe you'll come to Chametz Shover Alaba Pesach, therefore you got to get rid of it. So it's a major machlokas Rashi and Tosfos here. Umasha Meshaya and Yichad B'Tzina. Whatever's left after the bedika, you better hide it somewhere. So otherwise, you're going to lose track of it. You'll have to kadesh v'yitzrach bedika akrav. Otherwise, tomorrow you'll have to do bedika again. In my time at Rabbi Yehuda, that required multiple bedikas. Rav Chisda Rav Ravuna Dami Tavai Keneged Sholosh Hashbasar Shebetoyra. It talks about 3 destructions of chametz. Lo yirelecha chametz, v'lo yirelecha seor. That's 1. Shivas Yomim Seor Lo Yomotze B'Vaseichem, and Ach B'Yom Harishon Tashbisu Seor B'Bateichem. Mosif Rav Yosef asks a question. Rav Yehuda Omer Kol Shloi Bodek B'Shloisha Prokim Alalu. Whoever doesn't check it these 3 times, Shuvena Bodek. So you see, Alma Mikan Ve'elechu Depligi. He's only arguing, from that point on. And Marzutra Masni Achki. Marzutra learned differently. Mosif Rav Yosef, Rav Yehuda Omer, Kol Shloi Bodek Bechlam Mishloisha Prokim Alalu. Whoever didn't do B'dik in one of these times, Shuvena Bodek. There's no option of B'dik anymore. Alma B'Shuvena Bodek could deplete. That means the machlokas between Rav Yehuda and the Chachamim is only this question if they didn't do B'dik at all. Ella Rav Yehuda Nami Im Lo Bodek Ka'amar. Rav Yehuda is also going, he's not saying Lechatchila that there are 3 times to do B'dika. He's also holding that if you didn't do B'dika the night before, you got to do B'dika in the morning. So what's the machlokas? So Hachabahakamifki, Mar Savar, Mikame Isura in. That means you're allowed to do B'dika only prior to the Zman Yisur. Basar Yisur alone. Because if you do B'dika after the Zman Yisur and you find Chametz, you're going to come to eat it. But Rabbanan Savi Loi Gazrinan, the Rabbanan are not worried about that. They allow you to do B'dika even after the Zman Yisur. Freiti Gemara, Umi Gazer Rabbi Yehuda Dil Moasi Lamechlamine. Did Rabbi Yehuda goizer that if you do B'dika afterwards, you're going to come to eat it? Vatnan. We're going to learn a Mishnah not like that. This Mishnah will start teaching tomorrow, because this takes us into a new sugya.